Greetings friends. Thanks for stopping by for a visit. If you enjoy the video, please subscribe.
I don't tell sea stories much anymore. Not the real ones, anyway. Folks my age know the difference. There's the kind of tales you swap over coffee at the VFW, the ones that start with "you remember when Chief damn near," and end with everyone laughing or groaning or arguing over which port it actually happened in. Those are harmless, part of the weathered mythology of the fleet. What I'm about to tell you is something else. I'm 78 years old now. I've outlived most of the men I served with. My hands shake more than they used to, and some days my memory's sharp as a knife, while other days it feels like someone dragged it behind a truck. But this, what I'm writing here, this part of my life, has never gone fuzzy. If anything, it's grown clearer, sharper, like the older I get, the closer those nights drift back toward me. I served aboard the USS Hornet, CV-12, the Killer Bee, the Gray Ghost, take your pick. Everyone had a nickname for her. By the time I came aboard in 1960, she'd already lived a whole lifetime before me. Carriers don't usually have reputations the way destroyers or subs do, but the Hornet did. She'd fought her way across the Pacific in 43, 44, 45. Took hits, lost men, brought others home, worked Apollo recoveries later. A lot of steel remembers things, but that ship, Lord, that ship remembered more than most. I was 19 when I stepped aboard her for the first time. A kid out of Oregon who barely knew which end of a wrench to hold. They put me to work as an aviation bosun's mate, fueling, moving, spotting aircraft. Hot, dangerous work. Loud enough to rattle your bones. But at 19 you think you're invincible, so I took it all in stride. What I didn't take in stride were the nights. People think aircraft carriers are bustling all the time, every second of the day. But that's only during flight ops. Once the birds are chained, the pilots square away, and the deck secured, the ship goes quiet in a way I still can't explain. The ocean hushes itself. Machinery hums. Somewhere down a passageway, someone coughs or laughs or curses under their breath. But the rest? The rest feels like the ship is listening. That's the part I've never been able to shake. They say sailors are superstitious. That we believe in ghosts because we spend too long staring into dark water, because we sleep surrounded by steel and isolation, because we hear things in the pipes and bulkheads and call it spirits instead of science. And sure, there's truth to that. But there's another truth too. Sometimes we hear things because something is there. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat, no, I wasn't drunk. You don't get drunk aboard a dry ship unless you know how to siphon jet fuel or have a death wish. I wasn't half asleep. I wasn't telling sea tales to impress a girl in port. What I'm about to share happened months apart in different seas, under different circumstances, and each time I was sober, awake, and scared in a way that settles deep in your marrow. The first thing you need to know is that enlisted berthing on the Hornet was cramped even by Navy standards. Rows of bunks stacked 3 high, barely enough room to turn sideways. My rack was forward when I first joined the crew. Forward berthing was older than sin, patched together from modifications made after the war. Guys joked that it still smelled like 1944. Maybe it did. I didn't have the nose for history back then. Anyway, one night early in the 1960 Westpac, that's Western Pacific for you civilians, I had the forward watch. Dead of night, around 0200. Most of the boys were out cold. We were en route to Okinawa after a stint near the Philippines. Quiet seas. Quiet night. Too quiet, because that's when I first heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming down the ladder well into berthing. Sounded like someone trying not to wake the whole compartment. I figured maybe one of the chiefs couldn't sleep, or some poor bastard had drawn mess duty and was already miserable about it. So I didn't think much of it at first. But the thing about a carrier? When someone comes down a ladder, the whole ladder vibrates. You feel it in the deck. And that night, nothing. Just the sound. That was the first time the hair on my arms stood up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's encounter 1, and I'll write it in full when you ask for it. Before I jump into the details of the hauntings, because that's what they were, and I've had 60 years to make peace with that, let me paint the backdrop a little more. A Westpac tour in the early 60s wasn't like the war years, but it wasn't peace either. We rode back and forth across the Philippine Sea, the South China Sea, up toward Japan and Okinawa. Cold War tensions, SEATO exercises, early Vietnam surveillance, young men doing dangerous work under officers who were barely older than we were. You spend months out there, you learn every sound the ship makes. You learn how steam sings when a line warms. You learn how the catapults groan like they're waking up. You learn the thump of boots, the bang of a hatch, the whisper of someone sneaking a cigarette where they shouldn't. But on 3 occasions, 3 long months apart, I heard things that didn't fit any category I'd ever known. Things I couldn't chalk up to pipes or engines or tired imagination. I know people online love to tear these stories apart. Old man misremembers. It was just shadows. Carriers creak. Sure, you're free to believe that. Lord knows I tried to. Hell, there were years I convinced myself I had imagined it all. But I didn't. And I know I didn't. Because once in 1963, deep in the engine room, another sailor saw the same thing I did, saw it so clearly he screamed and nearly bolted for the ladder. You don't hallucinate in perfect synchronization with another man. And because when I finally visited the Hornet as a museum in Alameda many decades later, they had a whole section devoted to ghost sightings from volunteers, staff, even guests. Hundreds of reports. And some matched what I'd seen almost exactly. I'm not writing this for attention. At my age, the only attention I want is from my cardiologist. I'm writing this because the memory won't leave me alone. Maybe putting it down will quiet it some. The first encounter I had was the night I saw the man in World War II blues walk through forward berthing. The night it happened, I remember the air being strangely still. Forward berthing was usually a soup of smells: diesel, socks, sweat, jet fuel carried on someone's uniform, but that night it felt empty, like the compartment was holding its breath. I was on watch my first month aboard the Hornet, sometime in early 1960. We were in the Philippine Sea, making our way north toward Okinawa. Seas were calm enough that even the old-timers weren't complaining. Most of the guys were racked out, dead to the world. Only the red emergency lights glowed, dim, barely enough to make out the rows of bunks. I was leaning against a bulkhead, half reading the log, when I heard it. Clang. A soft metallic footstep on the ladder well. Someone was coming down. The sound was slow, careful. Like whoever it was didn't want to wake the whole compartment. That alone wasn't strange. Nobody wanted to piss off 50 exhausted sailors at 2 in the morning. But the ladder didn't vibrate. Anyone who's ever served at sea knows what I mean. A man on steel steps sends that vibration right through the frame. But this time, nothing. I straightened up anyway. Habit. Respect. And because something in my gut told me not to look casual, a figure stepped off the ladder and into the low red light. He was wearing blues. Not the modern utilities we all wore, but the old World War II-style denim shirt and trousers. Faded, worn thin. His Dixie cup was angled just slightly, the way the photographs from '44 showed sailors wearing them. I remember thinking, who the hell is this? Some reenactor? Some old chief walking around in nostalgia? He walked slowly through the center aisle between the bunks. His boots made the softest sound on the deck, barely audible, more suggestion than noise. When he got close, maybe 10 feet from me, he looked up. Not at my face, but through me. Like he was checking to see if the space was clear. His expression was blank, tired maybe. A man carrying exhaustion that didn't belong to this decade. I saluted him before I could stop myself. He didn't return it. Didn't even acknowledge me. Just kept walking toward the aft end of the compartment. The aisle he walked down was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 guys to squeeze past. But when he reached the row of bunks halfway down, he turned into that tiny side gap, too small for anyone to fit through without brushing against the racks. Except he didn't brush anything. He passed between the bunks like mist slipping through a fence. And when he stepped behind the last rack, he never came out the other side. I hurried down the aisle, squeezing past a snoring shipmate, and checked both ends of the gap. Empty. No one could have moved without making noise or waking someone. My heartbeat rattled my ribs. I tried to tell myself it was fatigue, imagination, low light. But the deck where he walked was still cold. The next morning, I mentioned it to an old bosun's mate. He looked at me for a long time and said quietly, "Forward berthing held overflow during the war. Some of those boys never made it back home. You saw one of them." I didn't argue, because I already knew he was right. If the first encounter shook me, this one rattled me straight down to the bones. Forward berthing was quiet, subtle, something you could almost convince yourself you imagined. This one, there was no imagining it. No half-light, no sleep fog, no excuses. It happened in '62 during one of our runs through the South China Sea, Cold War tension everywhere, early Vietnam heating up in ways most of us didn't fully understand yet. A lot of long days, longer nights, flight ops that stretched until you forgot what silence sounded like. Except on this morning, we weren't flying. It was just before dawn, the ship still running under red lights. I'd been assigned to check a few tie-downs on the forward part of the flight deck, making sure nothing had come loose overnight. Humid air, damp haze. Most guys were below, grabbing a quick coffee or waiting for the day's brief. I remember the quiet most of all. Quiet on a carrier feels wrong, like a held breath. I was halfway across the deck when I heard it. Stand clear. Loud, sharp, the kind of bark that sends everyone scrambling because a catapult's about to launch. Except we weren't launching anything. I froze. That voice, commanding, clipped, didn't belong to any officer I knew. It had a cadence to it, almost old-fashioned. Before I could make sense of it, I heard the metallic clank of a shuttle locking into place. Then the whine of a steam charge warming, rising in pressure. My stomach dropped. There shouldn't have been steam in the lines. The catapults weren't even manned yet. I jogged toward Cat 2, every instinct screaming something's wrong, already rehearsing how I'd explain an unauthorized activation in the logbook. But as I rounded the starboard side of the island, I stopped dead. There were men on the catapult, 3 of them, working in perfect coordination. One crouched near the shuttle, one standing at the waist, giving hand signals, another at the controls. I could see them, clear as day in the low red glow. But their uniforms, they weren't right. These weren't the yellow shirts and green shirts of our era. These men wore the old World War II deck gear, faded blue shirts, web belts, helmets that looked more like steel cranials than the updated ones we used. Their sleeves were rolled short, just like the old photos in the mess hall. I blinked hard, thinking maybe some training film was being recreated or some drill nobody told me about. Then the cat officer pivoted, raised his arm, and gave the signal, sharp and deliberate. Launch. A blast of wind hit me, so hard it staggered me backward. Heat, pressure, noise, the unmistakable punch of a catapult firing. My hands flew up reflexively, even though there was no aircraft in sight. I squinted through the gust, blinked against it, and just like someone flipped a switch, the deck was empty, dead silent. No crew, no steam, no shadows moving across the non-skid. Nothing out of place except my own heart hammering against my ribs. I stood there swallowing air for a long time, waiting for someone else to climb up from the island, waiting for an officer to demand why I was gawking like an idiot mid-deck. But no one came. I finally forced myself to walk the length of Cat 2, checking every bolt, every safety pin, every indicator. Everything was cold, dead, inactive. There hadn't been so much as a trickle of steam. When I finally went below to report the tie-down inspection, one of the senior petty officers, Thompson, a guy who'd been in since Korea, looked at me and raised an eyebrow. "You look like you saw a ghost," he joked. "I saw a crew," I replied before thinking. That wiped the smile off his face real quick. "What crew?" he asked softly. "Nobody's up there yet." I hesitated. I didn't want to sound crazy, but I also didn't want to lie. So I told him, carefully, piece by piece, the uniforms, the commands, the heat blast, the disappearing act. I expected ridicule, a laugh, a "get some sleep, kid." Instead, Thompson just stared at me for a long moment, jaw shifting like he was deciding something. Finally, he said, "You ever read the casualty list from 44? I shook my head. "A lot of men died on that deck," he murmured. "Crashes, fires, accidental launches, steam ruptures. Some didn't even make it off the catapults before everything went wrong." He paused, scratching his chin. "Some folks say flight ops never really stop on the Hornet. That parts of her are stuck in the wartime routine like echoes." I didn't want to believe him. But that heat, the wind, that wasn't an echo. That was something real, something physical, something that shouldn't have been possible. That night, I lay in my rack staring at the overhead, replaying the moment the figures vanished. The way the officer never once looked at me. The way the heat hit like a physical shove. It wasn't like the first time, with the man in blues slipping through a bunk row like a memory. This was louder, sharper. Not replayed, performed. As if the ship was running 2 different eras at once, and for a few seconds I'd stepped into the wrong one. I fell asleep wondering what else the Hornet was hiding. And unfortunately for me, there was more. A lot more. By the time 1963 rolled around, I was no longer the spooked 19-year-old who thought shadows were out to get him. I'd grown into the ship, learned her moods, learned the way she breathed. Men talk about steel like it's dead, but anyone who's ever stood watch on a carrier at 0-300 knows the truth. The ship is alive. She shifts in her sleep. She sighs. She remembers. And some things inside her remember more than the living do. I had rotated to more technical duties by then, still an aviation bosun's mate by rate, but pulling support watches in the engineering spaces, especially on nights where manpower thinned, and they needed extra bodies to monitor gauges and valves. Engine rooms aboard a carrier are their own world, boiling heat, oppressive noise, shadows that vibrate from the thrum of turbines. You come out drenched in sweat and smelling like oil, deaf for an hour afterward. I didn't mind the work, until the night I did. It was late summer 1963. We were steaming somewhere between Japan and the Philippines, running ASW exercises with a couple of destroyers. Long, monotonous days. Nights so hot they made your thoughts slow. I was paired with a younger fireman apprentice named Rivera, a sharp kid, eager, nervous the way every first-year sailor is when they're stuck deep in the ship with someone only slightly less scared than they are. We were on the mid-watch, the deadest hours of the night. Down in the engine room, though, you lose all sense of time. You can't see the sea, can't hear the world. Just machinery, endless machinery. We were checking pressure readings when I heard the first sound. Clink, a tool falling. Rivera heard it too. His head snapped up instantly. "You hear that?" he shouted over the turbine noise. I nodded. Tools don't fall on their own, not in a space this regulated. We walked toward the lower platform, weaving past pipes running hotter than hell. Rivera shined his pocket flashlight down into the grate below, sweeping slowly. Nothing. I tried to brush it off. The heat plays tricks. Metal contracts and expands. Things shift. But even as I told myself that, there was another noise. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythmic knocking on the steam pipe behind us, spaced just far enough apart to sound deliberate. Rivera went pale. "Someone's down here," he said. But that wasn't possible, not without us seeing them come in, and not without them logging their presence. The chief engineer didn't tolerate wanderers. Another tap, another, then silence. We went back to our gauges, pretending everything was fine, but every small noise made the hair on the back of my neck bristle. After about 10 minutes, Rivera stepped away to check a temperature line. That's when the wrench flew. Not dropped, not knocked. It flew. The steel tool shot off the magnetic pegboard like someone had yanked it with force and hurled it. It slammed into the deck plate, not a foot from my boots, ringing like a bell. Rivera jumped so high, he nearly smacked his head on a valve handle. "Jesus, what the hell was that?" he yelled. I was breathing fast, tasting copper in the back of my throat. There was no one near us. No vibrations on the deck. Nothing to explain it. Before either of us could speak again, we heard the footsteps. Running across the lower platform grating. Fast, heavy, human. Rivera backed against the bulkhead. "Someone's screwing with us," he kept saying, but he didn't sound convinced. I walked toward the ladder, not because I was brave, but because if I stood still, I was going to come apart. I leaned over the rail, peering down. Nothing, just shadows trembling in the heat. Then came the final thing, the one moment that still visits me in dreams. The lights flickered, just once, barely perceptible, but enough to disrupt the rhythm of the red emergency glow. Enough to paint the far end of the engine room in a pulsing, hellish color. And in that color, something moved. It stepped out from behind the condenser unit, slow and uneven, like a man who just stood up after being thrown to the deck. Rivera grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. The figure was human-shaped, broad-shouldered, slumped. His coveralls were soaked in oil. Dark patches streaked his chest and arms. His face, God, his face looked burned. Not fresh, not bleeding, blackened, cracked, like he'd been caught in a steam rupture decades ago. Eyes sunken, skin blistered into charred ridges. He swayed on his feet, as if from pain, and turned toward us. The heat in the room surged, hotter than it should have been. Like a valve had opened, dumping steam into the space. But all the gauges read steady. Then the figure opened his mouth. Not to scream, not to threaten, but as if trying to speak. Trying to say something we couldn't hear. And that's when a blast of scorching wind shot past us. It wasn't the turbines, they were steady. It wasn't any valve, we would have registered the pressure change immediately. This was something else. Something directional, controlled, angry. The lights fluttered again, and he was gone. Just gone. Rivera bolted for the ladder, and I went right after him. We didn't log anything until the end of the watch. Neither of us trusted ourselves to speak without shaking. When we told the chief the next morning, he listened very quietly, jaw tight, eyes distant. Engine rooms eat men, he said after a long silence. The Hornet lost more than her share down there. Burns ruptures falls. Some of them, he shook his head. Some of them never left. That was all he said. Rivera requested a transfer 2 months later. Can't say I blamed him. As for me, well, I finished my tour. But I never went down into that engine room again without feeling the heat shift in ways the gauges couldn't measure. Without watching the shadows for movement. Without wondering if the ship was remembering something or someone we'd long forgotten. And sometimes even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that burned face turning toward me in the red light.
Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more stories like these, please like and subscribe.